Today I have a personal mention for this Monday. You may or may not know that I've been on a conscious personal development journey for about 8 or 9 years now. And I say conscious because we're all on a personal journey, whether we're aware of it or not. And it's when we become conscious of our journey that we can accelerate our growth and learn as we travel along this journey. But about 2 months ago, I decided to take my journey a step further and deeper and go beyond the self. Now, if you're wondering, what does that mean? For me, it means seeing how I play into the bigger picture of life, realizing that it's not about me. And this means I have to detach from social scripts that feed the ego and tell us that in order to be happy and successful, we need certain things in our lives, and we have to follow a certain path, which isn't true. You could say that I'm kind of on a spiritual journey, which isn't necessarily a religious journey. It just means that really finding my deeper purpose in life. And I think this appears and unfolds differently for each of us, depending on where we are currently in our life. At this stage I am in my life, it's all about surrendering to what feels right and good and not worrying about when or how things are going to happen, but simply realizing that as long as I continue to greet every day with love, gratitude, curiosity, and with the intention to fulfill my life's purpose, that everything else will take care of itself and I need not worry. That said, I have 2 things that I want to share with you today. The first is an announcement, and the second is an experience that has kind of brought about this new awareness and state of being for me. And hopefully by sharing this with you, it may help you to expand your own awareness and also help you take care of some emotional waste that you may unknowingly be allowing to affect your physical and mental health. And I'll explain what emotional waste means in a moment. But first, let's talk about the announcement. So I have made the decision to write another book and work on putting together my very first conference, which hopefully will take place sometime next year in 2022. But both of these things I'm super excited about. But that being said, my priorities are going to have to shift a bit in order to make time to do this. Not to worry, this podcast is not going away. The only thing that is going to change is the schedule and the number of releases. Instead of doing daily podcast releases, I will be doing weekly releases. And after doing some analyzing of the data of the number of listens and downloads per episode, it appears many of my listeners, possibly you, enjoy Wednesday's Parenting with Emotional Intelligence and, of course, the traditional bi-weekly interviews that release every other Monday. Those seem to be the 2 favorites. So that being said, on weeks that there's not the traditional interview format, I will release on Wednesdays Parenting with Emotional Intelligence. I'm going to stick with Wednesdays. This week, though, will be unique because, well, you're getting this announcement. So you're getting Mindful Mention Mondays, and then you'll also have Parenting with Emotional Intelligence this Wednesday. And then the next episode will air on Monday, June 14th, which will be the traditional format. So if you're wondering, will you eventually go back to daily podcasting? The answer is I would absolutely love to. I just don't know when that will be. So it just really depends on how everything goes, and I'm just going to go with the flow. I will say, though, that if I do have spare time, I may do some one-off episodes like Q&A with Brittney-Nichole, but I will not release them on the podcast. I will only feature them on my YouTube channel, where I post all the videos of my podcast, which you may be watching right now if you're on YouTube. And the reason that I'm choosing not to post it on the podcast and only do it on YouTube is I just don't want to confuse listeners, especially new listeners, with these sporadic releases. I want there to be some form of consistency. So if you want to get notified when I release these, we'll call it bonus episodes for now, please hop over to my YouTube channel if you're not already there right now and subscribe to my channel. And that way you can be notified whenever I release these bonus episodes. You can find my YouTube channel either by typing in Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence, or you can type in my full name, Brittney-Nichole Connor-Savarda. The spelling's a little weird, so Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence might be the easiest route for you to take. But let's now move on to the second half of this episode. And that is what I recently experienced that was just transformational for me. As I said earlier, I'm taking a deeper dive into my personal development journey. And one morning I was sitting outside on my patio and I was reading The Alchemist, and I was meditating on the message of the story and just being present with myself, with nature, and how I was feeling. And as I became more present of my body, I began to notice a strong, heavy feeling in my gut. What I was feeling was energy, a very uncomfortable energy that naturally just wanted to work itself out of me. And while what I'm about to tell you may sound bizarre if you've never experienced it, just remember that everything and everyone is energy, and we all carry a frequency. This is just physics. It's universal law, just like gravity. So emotions also carry their own energy. So keep that in mind as I continue to share my experience with you. So the more that I focused on this feeling, this energy, I noticed that I wanted to get up and just kind of shake it off. It was just like almost like you had a little bit too much coffee, but it wasn't as much of like that adrenaline buzzed feeling. It was just uncomfortable. I needed to get this energy out. And so I started to shake my arms and hands as if I were shaking off water. And I felt the urge to walk around and even contemplated a run or some form of exercise. But I didn't, because I didn't want to get off of the focus of that energy and what it was telling me. So I decided to just kind of go for a walk. I walked upstairs. I went to the bathroom and was looking in the mirror at myself, and I just began to cry. And here's where it gets interesting. So as I started to cry, my chin started to quiver, and I looked as though I was in emotional agony. Anyone who would have seen me at that moment would think that something terrible was happening, that I was in a lot of emotional pain, discomfort. And yet, I had no emotions at all with my reaction. There was no emotion attached to that reaction. I was completely neutral and an observer of what was going on. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I was fascinated by this experience. And I still was being present with that energy. And I felt the energy move from my gut, up my body, into my throat. And I stayed present and I observed what I was feeling and listened to what my body was telling me. And the feeling, if you've ever had a panic attack or almost hyperventilated and you feel that knot almost in your throat, like your throat's closing up and you can't breathe, that's kind of what it felt like. But I didn't panic because I was just present and experiencing the energy very objectively, very much like just a curious observer. And so I listened to my body, and my body was telling me, breathe, just breathe. So I took in very deep and hard breaths, just in, out. But when I would release the air, it was as if I was just letting all of the air drain from my lungs. I didn't realize I could deflate my lungs as much as I did. I've tried this breathing exercise before, but it's never been as natural as it was then. It was as if this is what I needed to do. This is what my body was telling me to do. And I just released all of the air. Again, if somebody were to walk in and see me doing this, they would probably think I was having a panic attack and hyperventilating, because I was just, just doing that really deep, really hard, and still getting over the tears and crying. But I felt fine. Aside from feeling the energy, there was no emotions attached to it whatsoever. And so I continued to breathe, and I did this for probably 45 minutes or so until it just felt like I didn't need to do it anymore. And what happened next was an amazing experience, the most amazing experience of my life thus far. All of that heavy energy that I felt was completely gone. I had worked it out of my body and I felt as light as air. I literally felt if I stepped on a scale, I weighed no more than a pound or 2 at the most. Every cell in my body felt pure and clean. I don't know how else to describe it. It was the most relaxing, amazing experience. And it was just because I had worked out all of that built up, what I call emotional waste. And I believe the reason for the lack of emotion that was attached to this experience was because the emotions had already passed. All that was left was the energy that I never took care of and processed that had built up in my body and that was now being processed and released. Again, this may seem completely bizarre to some people, but when you understand emotions and energy, it makes complete sense. Think of it this way. Our diet dictates how we feel. If we have a healthy diet, we feel good, and we use that food as clean energy. But if we have a poor diet and we eat foods with lots of preservatives, trans fats, high sugar, it makes us feel bad and also leads to health problems because these toxins build up in our body and the energy that we don't use is stored as fat. And what we think and how we feel and how we manage our emotions is a diet in and of itself. Emotions unaddressed or poorly managed can equally build up in our system and in our body. And it takes a deep sense of awareness to feel when this is happening and effectively work them out of our system. And there are many different techniques to help us do this and develop this level of awareness. So meditation is great, breath work, and plant medicine. Depending on where you live, plant medicine may not yet be legal. That said, I must give a disclaimer that I do not encourage the use of illegal substances, regardless of the immense amounts of data that support the benefits of plant medicine. So if you want to learn more about all of these things that I talked about, like the breath work, meditation, plant medicine, I will put some information in the show notes about all of this stuff. Just know that I am putting it out there to inform you, not to encourage you to do any of this stuff. That's it. Okay. So I don't want to make this podcast too long, but I did want to share that experience with you because it was just so powerful. I felt joy. I felt peace. I felt energetically pure, and that there were no obstacles in my way to success and fulfillment. And since that experience, I've continued to stay present, aware, and positive. Although it's not as strong as it was that day, I still feel a sense of peace and surrender to my purpose in life. So again, if you'd like to learn more about what I've discussed, check out the links and the resources in the show notes. But otherwise, that is all for today's episode of Mindful Mention Monday, and the last Mindful Mention Monday for a while. So I hope you will join me Wednesday for Parenting with Emotional Intelligence. And until next time, live and lead with an open heart and an open mind. Thanks for watching.